Hello friends, welcome once again to my channel. In the last episode, we discussed on the credit creation by the commercial banks. Today, let us discuss on the limitations of credit creation by the commercial banks. Before that, please subscribe my channel to get more updated videos on the related topics. So let us start on the limitations of credit creation by the commercial bank. Limitations of credit creation by commercial banks. Meaning of bank. A bank is an institution which deals in money and credit. It accepts deposits from the public, makes the funds available to those who need them, and helps in the remittance of money from one place to another. Theoretically, commercial banks can create unlimited amount of credit through the expansion of deposits, but in reality, the multiple credit creation of the commercial banks are subject to a number of limitations. The limitations of credit creation are highlighted in the next slides of the presentation. The first point of limitation is amount of cash. The capacity of credit creation by the commercial banks is largely depends on the amount of cash possessed by the commercial banks. Larger is the amount of cash available with the banks, larger will be the credit creation capacity and vice versa. Second point of limitation is the cash reserve ratio. The credit creation capacity by the commercial bank is also limited by the cash reserve ratio of the bank. Thus, credit multiplier depends on cash reserve ratio maintained by the banks. The size of the credit multiplier is inversely related with the cash reserve ratio. Thus, higher the cash reserve ratio, lower will be the volume of credit multiplier and vice versa. Availability of borrowers. This is another limitation of credit creation capacity of the commercial banks. The commercial banks can create credit in the process of providing loans and advances to the borrowers. Thus, another limitation of credit creation capacity of the commercial bank is availability and the number of borrowers of the bank. If there is large number of borrowers, then banks can create large amount of credit. If there is less number of bank borrowers, then the commercial banks can create less amount of credit. Next point of limitations of credit creation by the commercial bank is credit policy of the other banks. The credit creation capacity of commercial banks is also depends on credit policies adopted by the banks. All the commercial banks do not adopt the same credit policies. If some banks decide not to utilize their full capacity of credit creation, then the amount of credit creation will be less. On the other hand, if the bank decides to fully utilize the credit creation capacity, then it will create comparatively larger amount of credit. Then the next point of limitation of credit creation capacity by the commercial bank is the monetary policy. The credit creation capacity and the size of credit multiplier is also limited by the monetary policies of the central bank of the country. The central bank has the power to influence the money supply in the economy. The central bank may adopt various qualitative and quantitative measures to control the credit creation of the commercial banks in the country. Next limitation of credit creation is the banking habits of the people. The development of banking system as well as the banking habits of the people also influence the credit creation capacity of the commercial banks. If the people prefer to transactions by cash but not by checks and other digital transfer modes, then the banks will be left with less amount of cash and hence there will be less capacity of credit creation by the commercial bank. But with the development of banking facilities and banking habits, people use more transactions with checks and other digital transaction modes, then the credit creation capacity of commercial banks will be higher. Again, another limitation of credit creation by the commercial bank is the existing business conditions. The credit creation capacity of commercial banks is also limited by the available economic and business conditions of the economy. During the period of depression, when due to low profit expectation, the businessmen do not come forward to borrow from the banks, hence credit creation capacity will be very small. On the other hand, during the period of business prosperity, the, the expectation for profit remains higher and hence the businessmen approach the banks for loans. This results higher credit creation capacity of the commercial banks. Availability of securities. This is another limitation of credit creation capacity of the commercial banks. The credit creation capacity of the commercial banks are limited by the availability of good securities. The bank loans are granted against the securities. Thus, larger the amount of securities with the banks, larger will be the credit creation capacity of the commercial banks and vice versa. Another limitation of credit creation by commercial bank is the different leakages. The credit creation and credit multiplier is limited by certain leakages. These are excess reserve. The first one is excess reserve. The commercial banks sometimes may not be willing to utilize their surplus funds for granting loans and may decide to maintain large size of reserves with the banks. Such situations may arise when there is expectation of a significant rise of interest rate in future and when the economy is heading towards recession. Greater the excess reserves maintained by the banks, lesser will be the credit creation capacity of the commercial banks. Second point of leakage is currency drains. The credit creation mechanism is based on the assumptions that the amount of loans granted by the banks return to them by the way of new deposits. But borrowers may not keep the whole amount of loans in the banks and may withdraw some amount of cash to hold it with themselves. These cash withdrawals or currency drains reduce the credit creation capacity of the commercial banks. Thank you. Friends, thank you very much for watching this video. We will meet again in the next episode on some new topic. Thank you.